Resident Evil Death Island.
Hello and welcome to Last Week On, the podcast where we take our favorite TV shows, movies, books, and video games, and we go back through them. My name is Adam Straughan, and today I have with me somebody very, very special. So she is the CEO of First Aid Spray podcast, and is also a video presenter for What Culture. So you might see our faces together on there. It is my it's my absolute pleasure to welcome to the podcast, Psy White. How are you doing, my lovely?
I'm good, thank you. It's exciting to be here. I just literally said to you, before we start recording, didn't I? It's nice to be on the other end of it for once and not have to worry about anything. And also it's nice because you and I I've been there for over a year now with What Culture, but we're the sort of the newer hires. So I said to you, didn't I, when I saw you a few weeks ago, what's it like being the baby now?
I know, right? And I was like, oh yeah, well, you actually put it that way. Yeah, it's wild. Still kind of finding my feet and everything, but still just so much fun. And everyone there is incredible, right? It's just such a nice space to work in. It's such a nice just environment. But Sai and I bonded pretty quickly because when I heard that she was into Resident Evil, I was like, stop everything. Like the brakes slammed on. I was like, we need to discuss this immediately. And I know Scott, the channel manager as well, was like, I mentioned Resident Evil to him and he was like, oh, you should talk to Sai. She absolutely loves it as well. And I was like, right, let's do this. I've been waiting and excited for this because I love it as well. But before we dive into the thing that we're covering today, which is Resident Evil Death Island, I need to ask you, Sai, how did you come to Resident Evil, the franchise itself? So, tell me your origin story about how it came to you, and maybe tell us about, your favorite characters or anything like that.
Sure.
Let us know.
It's a bit of a weird one because it's a bit of a hazy memory, and there's sort of I have lots of conflicting memories that don't quite make sense to me. The first game I ever played was Resident Evil 2, the 1998 version, obviously not the remake. And I seem to remember playing a PC demo that came attached to a magazine, and I think I was probably dreadful at it. And I also somehow owned the PlayStation version, and I don't remember what order that happened in or what, but as a kid, I was into monsters and, that kind of stuff. Despite the fact that it's a 15-labeled game, I would have been, 10 or something. And my dad was more than happy to be like, here's Dawn of the Dead, you'll love this. And he was like, video game about zombies, you'll love this. And it took me a while to love it because I could not get on with the controls because it's very difficult. And Resident Evil 2 notoriously just throws you in the middle of the action right away as well.
Oh, yeah.
And the first few times, once I got to grips with the controls, the first few times I would play it with the sound off because I was just terrified of the sound effects and the music and all that stuff. But now it's one of those games that, I can just blast through it in an hour and a half. It's my favorite game, full stop, ever of all time.
Yes.
And I've been a fan since then, really, all the way along to now. The ebbs and flows, but probably now more than ever, I guess, at this point.
Right. Is that with kind of all of the remakes and everything coming out at the moment? Is that what's kind of spurring you along with falling back in love with the franchise, do you think?
I feel like actually it was 7.
Because
and Revelations 2, underrated. I'm going to give a shout out to the underrated Revelations 2 because that was really a pleasant experience to come back to after Resident Evil 6, which was a bit of a hot mess, to say the least.
Yeah.
But I was one of these people, I didn't pay a whole lot of attention to what was going on with Resident Evil 7. I wasn't really keeping on top of it until the last couple of weeks. I wasn't playing the demo that everyone was talking about. I didn't really know what was what. And then within the last couple of weeks, I guess I kept seeing the trailer and I was like, I don't really understand because it's kind of a soft reboot. It doesn't look very much like Resident Evil, but I can't help but be interested. And I got it day one and I was like, we are back. This is great. That's really what kickstarted my love of Resident Evil again in a big way.
You know what? I'm so pleased you brought up 7 because I adore 7. For me, 7 is a horror movie. That's what you're playing. It's like a VHS, grimy type horror movie. And I love it for that reason. So I was similar to you. So, I started my first kind of entry point to Resident Evil was Resident Evil 2, the 1998 edition. Again, far too young to be playing that game, but who cares? So I know what you mean. And I remember obviously we had tank controls, everything like that. And when you're in the street at the start, and obviously all the fires going off and the zombies are just coming for you, and I didn't even know how to run. So like with Claire, I'm like walking through these zombies thinking, what am I doing here? So that was my entry point as well. Really interesting. Then I went back and played like Resident Evil, and then kind of carried on then Resident Evil 3, and then kind of carried on from there. Obviously did the first one remake as well, because that for me is gold.
Yes.
Yeah, oh my God, I could talk about that for hours. Love it. But yeah, so then Resident Evil 6 was a massive kind of nosedive for the series. I kind of liked what they were going for. It was nice kind of, to almost in a way kind of pull like be the Avengers type series.
I was about to say, it's like the Avengers of Resident Evil, which is funny because considering what we're about to talk about after this, but like it was the Avengers of Resident Evil before Avengers was a thing, where it was like, okay, we've got all these characters that have kind of existed separately or in different duos. We're going to pull most of them together. Unfortunately, there's a couple of missing names that probably should have been in there. But I always do this, I'll give Resident Evil 6 its props for bringing back Sherry Birkin.
Yep. And what a great character in that game as well.
Yep.
Just a shame that fundamentally there was a lot of gameplay and story that kind of fell apart with it. But yeah, I kind of liked the idea of what they were going for, at least with that one. But yeah, a lot of it fell apart. But my hot take here is that I'm not a big fan of Resident Evil 8.
Okay.
I can't get on with it. I love what they started with 7. Love it. And then with 8, it kind of, again, for me, it went into such a drastically different direction that I don't know, it felt like it's another game that's being made. And for me, it doesn't feel like it's got those Resident Evil hooks in me. With it kind of going in the direction that it's gone, it's very kind of like mythical creature realms where we've got like vampires, we've got werewolves and everything. And don't get me wrong, I'm somebody whose favorite TV show is Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I love that stuff. But for Resident Evil, I just it loses me. So I'm quite pleased that now, as it seems, we've got the Ethan storyline that's being closed. So who knows where we're going to go for Resident Evil 9? That'll be really interesting to speculate with that.
A really weird spot now in terms of, as you say, we've kind of ended that arc. What's next for the main series? And with the remakes, with Resident Evil 4 remake, it seems like the last absolute logical choice. Like now, they almost certainly are going to make more remakes, but the question really is, where are they going to go next with it? So it's a really strange time for the series.
It's bizarre. And like, gosh, like how different the series is now compared to like, when we were in the thick of it with like Resident Evil 4, Resident Evil 5, and we were getting different entries there as well, but we kind of had an idea where the characters were going. But now as you said, we've had the chapters closed now on this Ethan story. So where the heck are we going? Are we going to continue back with classic characters again? Like what is going on with Chris? Like all of these different questions. So it'll be really interesting to see what they do with 9. And I'm really pumped to see what Capcom are going to do with that entry, because that will be fascinating. However, today, we are talking about the latest animated feature, which is Resident Evil Death Island, which recently released. So to give a little bit of context about this, it is directed by Eiichiro Hazumi, who directed all 4 episodes of Resident Evil Infinite Darkness. And then we also have the writer, which is Makoto Fukami, who co-wrote Resident Evil Vendetta. So these are people who have dealings with the franchise prior to this. And then we have familiar returns as well. So we've got, Matthew Mercer as Leon, who's always welcome back. We've got Nicole Tompkins as Jill, obviously when we had Jill again, stepping up for the Resident Evil 3 remake there. And then we've got Stephanie Panicio, who is Claire, obviously the voice of Claire from the Resident Evil 2 remake as well. So I love that they've gone down this route of bringing the same actors back for this, especially for, as we hinted on earlier on, the big Avengers meetup with all these characters. So I'm super excited.
It's a weird sort of combination of stuff for me, like as well, because you talk about Stephanie and Nicole, especially from the sort of more recent remake games. But Matthew Mercer hasn't been in Resident Evil since Vendetta, and the last game he was in was Resident Evil 6, because we've moved on to a different actor. So it is really nice to have him back, and it's really nice to have a real mix of like familiar and more recent voices. Also, do you want a little bit of trivia right off the top?
Absolutely.
Kevin Dorman, who plays Chris Redfield in this film, he played him once before in Resident Evil Vendetta, but other than that, he was the voice of Chris in the Resident Evil 5 trailer before they cast Roger Craig Smith. So he was originally at least set up in some form to play Chris in Resident Evil 5 before they went with the casting they did. And all the years later, he gets to play him again in these 2 movies, which is really cool.
Wow. Gosh, I didn't know that. I love a good little factoid. Yes. Always bring that. Snaps for that. I love it. No, that's incredible. I didn't know that. And I have to say, like Roger Craig Smith, I actually did like as Chris.
Oh yeah, sure.
Although whenever I hear his voice, I hear Ezio Auditore. Like I just hear his voice in that because
he's also Sonic the Hedgehog, which is really weird.
I know, right? Like such a diverse resume of characters. Wow.
Yeah.
But yeah. So what we'll do, Si, is with this is we'll kind of talk through some of the story beats and kind of where we feel like the story landed with this as we'll go through, and then we'll talk about each of the characters individually because I think each character has an interesting arc, or at least an attempt of an interesting arc in this film and what they kind of go for. And I think there's certain characters, which you and I will probably agree on, definitely are pushed more into the central limelight of this film than, say, some of the other characters as well. But yes, I mean, overall, let's kind of start with the movie itself. So what did you think of the movie just in general thoughts going in?
So I've watched it a couple of times now, and I came out of the first viewing really very happy with it, like quite excited, in fact. I'm not overly fond of the CGI movies as it is. You know, they are what they are. Some of them I feel most of them are dreadful, to be quite honest. So it's not a high bar for me to say this is my favorite one on first viewing. Second time around, once the excitement perhaps had worn off of seeing all the characters together, I was been a little more critical. But I still think it is one of the better ones. For some of the things it does right, it does really well. And some of the other stuff I can just let slide because it's a Resident Evil CGI movie. I'm not expecting a particularly well put together plot line.
Yeah, no.
So it's fine. It's serviceable. I think this one, perhaps more than any of the others, really is for the fans a little bit. So that's kind of where I come out from.
Yeah, no, you know what? Like, I'm kind of similar to you. So, like, as you said, the bar isn't set very high with the animated features of Resident Evil. We've had some it ranges from okay to pretty dire.
Yes.
But this one's definitely up there. And they did a lot of interesting stuff with this. And like, I mean, for me, as you say, like as a long-term Resident Evil fan, to see all of those guys, that one shot before the infamous tentacle scene, when we see all of them pointing their guns, like that for me was like my heart did a leap. Like just to see the whole gang together, which we haven't had like, oh God, ever, ever.
It's bizarre that it takes place in a CGI movie.
I know, right?
Strange.
And I'm kind of hoping that this is kind of like a hint towards what Resident Evil 9 will be, because if they take us down this route with all the characters together, however they play, I know they kind of tried this with Resident Evil 6 and it wasn't the best execution, but if they manage it somehow to make some magic with all of these characters, I am fully in, because all of those characters, all of them on screen, I just love them all. I really love them all.
Yeah, it's wonderful, and I'm glad they've done it. I would worry in a game about it's the same thing with a film, but with a game more so, I feel a bit more precious about it, where it's like, eating each other's time, and how do you balance action and horror and stuff like that is a difficult question anyway with Resident Evil. But when you've got a team of professionals, it's kind of hard to make it a horror game. They know what they're doing.
And that's interesting you say that as well, because with this film, there were moments of this film that I really, really loved. And there were some moments that I was like, okay, we're going down the generic kind of action route again that we've seen before. But there were certain horror moments in this film that I absolutely loved. And I was like, it's nice that we're harkening back to the roots of this series. To point out a couple of them, like obviously kind of Jill's introduction when she's going through this, almost like this haunted house with the lights off with the torch. And I love the little detail of like clicking the torch on and off and like leaning back just to see if there's any reaction to anything in the room. I love that. That's her STARS training coming right in there. And I love that. And then, so that was great. But the scene for me that I loved, down in the sewer, for the first time. So I loved that. And then when that liquor creature comes out, and all of that sequence where they just freeze and the tongue comes out and like kind of goes past Jill's face, and that for me was pure like Resident Evil horror. And I loved that so much. What did you think of that sequence?
Yeah, actually, I really appreciate it, because the liquors sometimes, I wouldn't say they're overused, but they're bordering on it a little bit. They are in everything now. But that being said, I don't feel like they're used as well as they could be most of the time. Whereas this one, actually getting to see what, use their abilities, use what makes them liquors, like trying to drag Jill away. It's like, oh, that's probably what would happen, instead of just they're a monster and then they kill it. There was a little bit of back and forth struggle, which I really liked, and Leon gets his arm grabbed when he's got his gun ready and stuff like that. I was like, yeah, it really added to it. Definitely, it was a good display of what Lickers should be in combat.
No, it was an absolute set piece. And I agree. Like, you think as well the journey that like Leon's gone on, for example, like in Resident Evil 2, when he first sees that liquor on the ceiling and then kind of backs away and then it drops down. And straight away it's just fight or flight. But I love obviously in the game you can just freeze. And then the liquor will go back down and just start to crawl towards you. But normally, when you're the first time playing this and you've got that shotgun, you are unloading into that liquor. But yeah, and you think about like Leon in that moment, seeing this for the first time, thinking, "Oh my god, what do I do?" To the Leon now, when he sees that liquor, just freezes because he knows what to do. And even that's just a little mini arc for that character. And I think it was fantastic. Absolutely love that.
Yeah, there's lots of little bits like that, isn't it? Like immediately after that, they start pushing bricks through and find a secret passageway, and you're like, because it's Resident Evil, and they're there, and they almost don't react to it. They're like, yeah, okay, cool.
yeah. This is what we're used to. Yeah, we've been in mansions, where this happens. Yeah, love it. So I did love the horror elements of that. I really liked the prison sequence as well, when you first got like Jill, Chris, and Claire. And by the way, Chris is like this holiday type shirt that he's wearing. Like, give me that, please. I love that. Let's go to an island. Let's put on this flowery shirt. And then Jill's wearing this long, like, cardigan as well. Like, just to blend in. I love the fashion there. But that sequence I actually really liked because, again, it was like, it was really self-contained. It was just them three. We had obviously on Alcatraz Island. They're in there, like, you know, obviously all of the tourists start to suddenly turn and we don't know how at this point, but like our heroes aren't. So like, what is going on here? And then just this like action sequence that unplays again, like it leans heavily into that. But I love that the stakes are quite high because again, it's in this tight corridor in a prison where they can't really go anywhere. And then these, you know, everyone, all the tourists are just turning instantly and like, whoa, what the heck is going on? But yeah, that sequence itself I thought was really cool because again, like, it's not explicitly pure horror. It does lean at that action horror territory, not in the way that the sewer scene was with like Jill and Leon. But I just love that the tension there was really high. And again, we got to see our heroes be our heroes.
My favorite part of that sequence is Claire in getting into her own sort of cell and sort of pushing a table up against it with a bunch of people. And you have the moment there where she thinks, okay, we're going to be safe because nobody's bitten. And then people start turning in that room anyway. And you have her like, what, you know, audibly react like, what the hell's going on? I was like, yeah, that's really cool. And also, to be fair, at that moment, I was like, okay, well, she's trapped in a room now. So someone's going to have to come save her. We don't actually get a resolution to what happens there, but I'm glad that she doesn't have to have a damsel in distress moment. Like nobody in this film necessarily has it on, so that's good as well.
No, absolutely. I mean, you know, I kind of hinted on earlier on, like when we were chatting about the movie there, but for me, the female characters really take center stage in this movie in a
I think so,
big way. And obviously, when we talk about the characters, we will talk about them specifically. And I love that they went for that. But now I want to just ask you about the opening. So this is really interesting. So this is kind of like a flashback where obviously we have our two characters. We have Dylan and we have JJ. And so this whole intro, I mean, this was giving me like Resident Evil 3 opening vibes when we see like, you know, them running into Raccoon City, very much this type of vibe. And I kind of liked it. It was like, it gave me like, you know, that reference point back to that game, which by the way is one of my all-time favorites, not even just Resident Evil, but just in general, man. Like that opening is incredible. And then, so obviously we get an introduction to JJ, to Dylan, and I kind of liked where they were going here. I was like, okay, like we don't know these characters, but it's quite interesting. It feels Resident Evil 3. And then obviously we get to this point where, you know, the whole gang, like the whole team that they're with, they all get turned except them two. And then, we get that, unfortunately, JJ is trying to fight them off, gets bitten in the struggle, and then it's up to Dylan to then obviously with instructions from his higher up to then take out anyone that's infected, which includes JJ. What did you think of this opening, Psy?
I actually did enjoy it. Like, I think at this point, if you were to go through the series and count the number of people that were in Raccoon City that survived, we got a startlingly high number. Because they love referencing it, don't they? Like, it's that memorable thing that they like to reference back for people to be like, we're going to say Raccoon City. That way, you know, it's Resident Evil. But you know, that's not really a complaint because they did handle it really well. You're right. It fits in really nicely with what you're used to seeing. So it does give you those nice tinglies of Resident Evil 3 and there's a scene in Outbreak as well that kind of shows sort of police barricades and stuff at the city limits. It might very much reminded me of that. And it just really adds to the experience I love though seeing just a little bit more of that outbreak. It is a shame that so many people have survived it now. It kind of cheapens it a little bit. But to add to what it did for the villain's character arc in Dylan is very clever. Like the fact that it kept flashing back to it as well, and you got a little bit more of his story each time. It really, really added to him as, again, Resident Evil also has a lot of people that are just like, I'm the villain for this one thing, and then I'm going to go away, which is a little tiring. But at least Dylan, he got a bit of backstory over the course of the film in a really clever way. So it was a really good setup.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. Like, I kind of blow hot and cold with Dylan. I like what they set up with Dylan. What I don't like is kind of the ending that we got with Dylan, because for me,
not a lot of payoff, is there?
No, Dylan was in a position of power, and Dylan threw that away because Dylan decided to go down the Resident Evil route of, well, this needs a last boss, and it kind of,
I'm the monster.
Yeah, I'm the monster now. So yeah, like, but I agree with you. Like, I love this setup where we got this. Because sometimes, like with as you say, the enemies, we don't really get a lot of backstory. It's just, I'm evil for reason X. Or like, I want to do this because, again, generic reasons. I want ultimate power. I want to have these bio weapons and I want to do with them what I can. Which,
I just wanted to say, like, when you look at Resident Evil Vendetta, it does give you the sort of setup for the villain in that. And it's so night and day, because the villain in Resident Evil Vendetta begins the film by falling to his knees after his wedding explodes and goes, no, into the sky in like the most comical fashion. And this, by like a complete contrast to that, you have Dylan beating his friend's head in with a filing cabinet or drawer or whatever it is that he's doing. It's in silence is so much more effective. Like, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. And as well, like, to watch that as an audience, you're like, wow, like, you kind of you understand the trauma a little bit more. Like, it makes sense, and you can see why he's hung up on that, because I mean, anyone to have to do something like that, wow. And the thing is as well, like, the decision to do that has kind of been taken out of his hands, because he's ordered to do that, like it is literally, you must do this. But as well, he knows he must do it because he will die if he does not. And on top of all of that, it's his actual friend. It's not just another colleague. Like, it is his friend. He's talking with him at the beginning before they even get out into Raccoon City. And it hangs so much more weight on that. And I kind of love that they went for that. And I wish they fleshed out some more of the kind of evil, villainous characters, except for Wesker, who I adore. But I wish they fleshed out some more of their villain characters to give more of that kind of subtext and to them,
Absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely an issue that the series has had ever since Wesker sort of left it. There's a bit of a vacuum there for a good villain to be built up media to media, but they just don't want to seem to commit to longer story arcs. But in the case of a CGI film, like, it's fine. Like, you wouldn't expect it. It was nice we had a returning villain. That was something, a little tie up of a loose end. Like, okay, that's cool. Yeah.
And it was like, like Maria, like, lovely to see her back in that incredible fight scene that she had with Leon. Obviously vengeance again for her father, which again I actually quite liked. I like that it wasn't just like, because he could have just had like his own bioweapon there that was like in a very similar form and fighting Leon. That scene could have played out exactly the same, but it was nice to bring the Maria character back, and I really like that they did that. And it also works as a nice parallel as well to, like, in a way, like, like when she kind of fights very similar to the way Jill did in Resident Evil 5 when she was obviously under mind control. And I really liked that they went down that route, because as soon as you saw her fighting like that, you were like, I've seen this before. And it was interesting in that style, the way Jill was in Resident Evil 5. And it was nice kind of just to flash back to these kind of moments, because as we know, Jill is still suffering with a lot of trauma from that in this film. But yeah, what did you think of Maria?
Yeah, I don't think it's one of those things where I don't feel like she added a ton to the experience. As you say, it could have any old standard, but it was nice that she was there as a tie back. And again, for the fans, it was cool. It was the right move to make when they could have easily just included just another character one and done situation. So I'll take it over that. Absolutely. It wasn't massively additive, but it was a nice little thing. And this film's littered with like, oh wow, I wasn't expecting a reference to this or that. And so it's another one of those like, oh yeah, cool, that's neat. Yeah.
And when we talk about the characters individually, we'll bring up some of those references, because there was some really clever little moments that I thought, they're really grounding the characters in their own experience from the games. And I really love that they did that. I want to talk about the kind of Dylan's motive here. Now, I obviously understand, he's still suffering with the trauma from the loss of his friends. And basically, he wants to make all of these companies pay for using people as pawns, basically, to deal their evil work, which is exactly what he was used like to do that to his friend. And I completely get that to a degree. Now, the setup with the bio drones, like these tiny little insects that he has control over, that he can kind of guide to then basically inject this new T virus into people, which then turns them immediately. So, it's no longer airborne. It's not passed on by saliva, which is what obviously Rebecca tells us as well earlier on. But it is these little bio drones. Now, I love that. I genuinely love that, because that gives him ultimate power. And, like for me personally, if he just stayed on Alcatraz Island, kept a low profile, and just sent these out into the world, he would have been unstoppable. But instead, he's like, let's invite the whole gang over. And then at the point when he's most powerful, he's then like, you know what? I'm going to inject myself and throw myself into this beast and become the last boss. Why do it? Like, you had all the power, right?
Utterly bizarre as well, because when he's being approached by, I can't remember if it was Jill or Claire. They're like, Rebecca's cured us of the biodrone T virus, and he's like, I knew that was going to happen. Then why did you do it? Like, what was the motivation behind that? He's so weird. Like, it doesn't. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that doesn't really go anywhere. Like, he has an obsession with Russian roulette, it seems.
Yeah.
Doesn't pay off. Like, doesn't go anywhere. He repeatedly throughout the film sort of puts a gun to his own head and pulls the trigger and gets lucky, which we presume he's been doing all of his life. And then it's not like he accidentally kills himself or whatever. It never actually resolves. It's like, that's, as you say, the character was really interesting up to a certain point, and then it just goes, whoop, gone, done.
Yeah, literally boop into the water. Then I should say fish monster. But I do like what you said earlier, Psy, which is that they kept kind of the identity of Dylan like close to their chest for like most of the kind of first kind of third of the film, I'd really say, where it kept flashing back, and I actually really liked that, because it was giving us drips of like, we had this other storyline, but then we're going more into what happened there, and then when you officially put the dots together, like 2 and 2 together, and you're like, okay, this is actually him from the opening. And I love that moment of just that revelation. No pun intended. But I love like that coming up, and you were like, that payoff was actually really nicely done. But it is just a shame, because this could have been, if he survived this, and like say the film ended where he just released them into the atmosphere, like imagine that as a cliffhanger. Like, what would our heroes do? Like, that would have been crazy. But again, to write their way out of that, we get him transforming into a giant fish monster to be a last boss, as we've seen a lot of times, obviously. But as well, what else I liked about this film is I liked that we got an introduction to each character individually. And I actually quite like that. So it wasn't kind of just like, say like Code Veronica, when it's like, oh, Leon was the one who drove the speedboat that dropped off Chris, and we never actually see Leon. We actually got to see every character in their intro. So we got to see like, what was Claire up to? Well, she was on the beach. She was researching this whale that's been bitten. And then what was Jill up to? And then, Jill's with Chris and like with Rebecca, and she's on the shooting range, and, and I loved all of this. Like, Leon's obviously got a mission as well, where he's going after the Dr. Taylor. And I love like that they all have a mission and all have a reason that brings them together. Yes. And I actually quite like that. It's like sewing a thread through all of the characters to bring them to one location, right?
Yeah, and especially because they didn't, when they went to Alcatraz to kick things off proper, they didn't all go at once. Like, they bump into Leon, like, who's there on, as it turns out, related business. And Rebecca doesn't go with them, but then at a certain point, she's like, okay, I need to get involved. And she takes a squad in with her to protect her and stuff. Yeah, it was really cool. Instead of just like dumping them all on the location and being like, now go, to have those kind of points come together at certain points was really good. I thoroughly enjoyed that. Yeah, Leon kicking off the film in the very Leon way, you know, blowing up cars on the motorway and whatever. It's like, yep, that's about right. I feel like they were making a joke about that throughout the entire film. Like, he destroyed 4 vehicles in the entire film. It's like, yeah, that's what he does now.
That's how Leon. Like, it was full on like Matrix Reloaded, like the whole scene on like the motorway, right? Like, even like Maria jumping on like a helmet on, dressed basically like Trinity, like jumping, doing these Matrix moves on the motorbike with Leon. It was like, come on, what are we doing here, guys? Is it the Matrix now? But it was really fun. Some of the writing, I have to say, now Resident Evil is famed for having like cheesy and corny lines, and oh my god, like some of these, like I wrote some of them down, and like I literally wrote eye roll next to them. Like, what Like when the point when Dylan, like, he injects basically all of our main heroes except Jill. And then like they're kind of talking. And by the way, I love the plot armor of where like everybody else turns into a zombie within 10 seconds who's been hit by the spider. But Claire, oh no, 10 minutes go by and she's still like still fighting this infection. Yeah. I know, right? Love that. But then like when like, oh God, when like Leon and Chris are talking to each other, like the world's fucked up, no denying it. We can't save the world by killing it. And I said, oh my God. And then like, when Jill even says like he's a tough cookie, all right, I was like, all right, okay, what are we doing here, guys? but we've come to expect the cheesy lines, right? Like it's part of the core of Resident Evil at this point.
Yeah, pretty much. To be fair, I feel like Leon had a couple of really good one-liners in this film. Yeah. So he was definitely there to bring sort of like the cheesiness to the right level. Yeah. Like when I can't remember exactly what it was, but when Dylan sort of reveals himself and he does the typical villain, like, finally, I have you all here. And Leon says something to the effect of, it's you, whoever you are. It's like, you got a laugh out of me, to be fair. So it's about, it all just kind of like washed over me. It's like, this is the standard that I was expecting out of a Resident Evil animated film. With Infinite Darkness coming out like last year, this isn't really any different to that. Maybe only slightly better. Right.
Yeah, that's fair. That's a fair assessment. I agree with that. Let's talk about the ending side. So, this is what, for me, the film exists for this reason. And that is all of our characters coming together. So like we get, and this is the scene that we saw in the trailer where you and I probably lost our minds, where we saw the tentacle, we saw the slow motion, everyone jumping over, even the scene before that when all the characters are all pointing their guns, right? Like for me is like Christmas Day as a Resident Evil fan, because, because we've been waiting for this moment for so long. And I, as a fanboy, like I just adored it. Like I just love seeing our characters come together. And I love as well that after that initial moment, they all kind of disperse and they get knocked around, but they're all still helping each other from different vantage points. And I love that kind of, it's a typical Resident Evil final fight, giant mutated boss. Like we always get this. But I just love that there was so many little micro moments in this that harpened back to other Resident Evil franchise moments. Chris on the back of that van, manning the machine gun. That is Resident Evil 5. I mean, Jill with a plasma rifle. Hello. Like, we are literally getting all of these little moments sprinkled throughout. I mean, talk to me, Psy. What's your thoughts on this final battle sequence?
Yeah, you're right. Like, I hadn't necessarily thought of it that way. I kind of rolled my eyes about the sort of rail cannon thing, because she has the moment where she'll like fire it and then it's got to recharge. It's like, well, you did this once before. You know how these things work. They recharge. You should know that. But like, when you point out that like Chris on with the machine gun is another reference as well, I was like, yeah, that's a good point. And there was that weird like double rocket launcher thing. I was like, well, that's different and unique. I'll give it that much. It kind of ups the stake. This thing takes a rocket launcher made of two different parts to take out. That's how big of a deal it is. It's for me, it's all about the little pair ups, right? And we've sort of talked about Leon and Jill encountering each other for the first time on screen. We've had Claire and Jill now interact for the first time. Jill and Rebecca interact for the first time. Claire and Rebecca, apparently all the female characters just stayed well away from each other, I guess.
Apparently so.
Claire and Rebecca sort of working from a distance to take out the drones while the rest of them fight off the monster is like really cool usage of the characters as well, because they're not necessarily the more action hardened too, Rebecca especially. So them playing a bit more of a support role was really good in the fight. Yeah, you know what? As a showdown goes, it was really good. Even with the you say about making a reference to Matrix, which Resident Evil loves to reference the Matrix. Oh yes. There was a moment, maybe I'm wrong, but there's a moment in this fight that basically was just Jurassic World, where Jill was like waving a flare and moving backwards. And I was like, that is just lifted from Jurassic. Fair enough. It's Resident Evil. That's what they do. They like to reference films. So you even got that sprinkled in there as well. Yeah, no, thoroughly enjoyable and cathartic for Jill to sort of be the tip of the spear as well when it came to defeating the end boss, which I'm sure we'll talk about. Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I agree. And like that's a really good point, actually. The pair-ups were like really, really nicely done. And again, like it's nice to see these characters who we don't often see together, because they could have so easily put like, Chris and Jill together, Leon and Claire together, or like put Rebecca with Chris. They could have easily done that, but I love that they didn't. And they purposely give us like those intros, like, when
when Jill first like walks into like that canteen area, like way back like at the beginning, she says like, "Oh, hey Rebecca, hey Chris," you know, and it's nice that we get these kind of intros for ourselves as well
Yes.
as fans to see that. Really, really love just to see them like hanging out basically,
Yeah.
and as well having an understanding of each other and who each other is, and like understanding the capabilities and like, you know, like even at one point when all of the gang's infected and they say, look, there's still hope because we've still got Jill, and they understand how important and the capabilities of what Jill's got. And I love that they added that as well. But yeah, the pair-ups were just cool. Like, as you say, like this double-ended rocket launcher, which didn't really make a lot of sense. Like, why is one character looking this way and another one looking this way? Like, why is that happening?
Who knows?
Yeah, we'll never know. And, you know, that's Resident Evil.
Yeah,
but yeah,
right.
But I love as well, like Jill, like as you say, like, you know, waving this flare, like enticing the beast back, diving into the water, letting off this huge kind of grenade type thing that she's got. And then like, you know, like the rocket launcher firing, but they're all helping each other and coming together in the best way towards this end. And like, I love that, you know, everybody's got their role, right? And there was like one moment when, as you say, when they released the bio drones, and like at first when Rebecca says like, wait, no, let's not destroy them, we could do something with them. And then like, then you see them all kind of attack the beast. I just thought that was so cool. Like that was a nice little story beat, because, you know, they could have just, you see them all literally manning every single rocket launcher you've ever seen in Resident Evil ever. You see them blasting them in the creature. And that could have just been like a scene of they all fire the rockets into them, kills the creatures. That's the end. Yeah, that's the end of the film. But I love that they went for something that references back to what we've seen in the film already. It was almost like a Chekhov's gun moment. And I really like that they did that.
Yeah, agreed. It's nice because in the last film, Rebecca did absolutely play the sort of kidnapped victim in a very weird way. So for her to get to what she does there, as you quite rightly point out, is like a major part of them defeating this beast, this little moment of the idea that she has in the last split second. So yeah, as a big Rebecca fan as well, I was like, excellent. They put her to good use.
Absolutely. And then like right at the very end as well, when they're just all chilling out, like and the helicopters are coming over and they're just going to go, like classic Resident Evil, like, you know, what people are escaping on a helicopter, or, you know, we've seen this, but I kind of love it. Like that is a nod directly in the direction of the fans, right? Oh, it's like a wink. Here's the helicopters. You know what we're doing here.
Credits are about to roll.
Yep. They're all laying back. They're looking up. I'm waiting for like some cheesy, like 80s anthem to play over the credits, like, which give me that any day, by the way. But it was nice, like, to see them all kind of together as well at the end. And it was a nice ending point, I think, for that as well, because who knows, as we've said earlier on, where they're going to go into the future with this now. Like, are they keeping the characters together? They're going to do their own separate things. Who knows? But now let's talk about the characters, Psy. And, who to start with? Okay, let's go in with a big gun. Let's go in with the one, my absolute hero, which is Jill Valentine. Now, I remember when I saw, like, when Resident Evil 3 was being remade, which, by the way, Resident Evil 3 holds a very special place in my heart, mainly because, as well as Resident Evil 1, because I just adored Jill. Like, Jill is my girl. And we talked about this before. Jill is, like, literally, like, my reason for Resident Evil, even though it's weird because I played as Claire first, but Jill, for me, is just the one. And when I first saw the redesign, I was a little bit worried, I have to admit, for Resident Evil Remake, because, you know, I have such an idea in my mind of like who Jill is. And, you know, like that particular kind of character model of Jill, we've seen her so long. I actually follow the character, the actress as well, who they modeled on Instagram. And I whenever I think of Jill, still I see her. But then I played the game and I really fell in love with this actress. I thought she really, really delivered. And especially in this film, I love what they did with Jill. I think basically she's a superhero, like in this. And like there was, I mean, you know, they're dealing with her trauma from Resident Evil 5. And I think that's really clever because this is something that we don't normally get in Resident Evil. Like these characters have been through hell, many, many occasions. And it's nice that we get like kind of that close look of Jill's been through some shit. She's still figuring a lot out. She's still really kind of hung up on what she's been through, especially being mind controlled by somebody who initially started off as their leader, right? As like the team. And then it's been through all of this and it's now like, no, I'm not going to let this get to me. I'm going to fight through this. And doesn't let her, she's not burdened, she's burdened down to a degree, but she fights her way through it. And we see that both physically and mentally. I mean, even in that scene when she's in the prison, like the floor caves in, and then like we get her fighting, like running up the wall, throwing the knife back in that guy's head. Like Jill is just a badass in this movie, right?
Yes, it was the biggest news that she was going to be in this. And there was a lot of conversation in the community about it when it got revealed about, is she just kind of going to be in a flashback? What's going on here? And then we find out, because when the trailer dropped, she was kind of like the stinger at the end as well.
Yeah.
And it's like Capcom and maybe Sony know that that's a big deal. Otherwise, they wouldn't have done it. And quite rightfully, everyone lost their minds because Jill hasn't been in a piece of Resident Evil media that's not a remake, in the case of Resident Evil 3, since 2009. So it's 14 years. She hasn't appeared in the series lore for that long either. She hasn't been in anything that takes place outside of 2009. So there was so many questions about, why that is, who she is, where she's at, what's going on. So it's really good that they addressed a lot of that in this story, as you say, about her trauma, because she's almost certainly been through the worst of it with what happened to her with Resident Evil 5 and being sort of mind controlled and all this. They made a good point to reference that. I take issue with the fact that all these years later she's still dressed like she did in 1998, but that's a whole other thing. But they did an incredible job with putting her in the main role and having them address that and kind of, I guess, rounding it off the way that it ends, Jill sort of closing lines to the monster, get over it. It's kind of like to herself a little bit, isn't it? In a way. So yeah, it's so good to have her back. And Nicole Tompkins did an incredible job of aging her version of Jill up from Resident Evil 3 Remake and delivering a performance that had all the weight of that trauma in it as well. Just like superb. No notes. She's fantastic.
Totally agreed. Like, honestly, like any kind of like hesitations I had when I first saw the character model and everything going into Resident Evil 3, when I started playing it, they all disappeared immediately. I thought, this is a voice actress and an actress, to be fair, who understands the character and gets her and treats her with the respect that she deserves for the fans, for the series, for everything. So no, as you say, no notes. I love what they did with Jill in this film, and like really kind of just highlighted how incredible she is. And like, she is the one who, in that long stretch as well, when they're all infected, is the one who, although she meets up with Rebecca, and Rebecca obviously has the antivirus, but Jill is the one who gets things, gets the ball rolling, like starts the recovery process of all of this. And I just loved her in this film. Every time she was on screen, all of the fighting that she was doing, as I say, the moment of communication between her and Leon in the sewers without saying anything to each other, like, we see this creature, we both know what this is, do not say anything. Love that. They just understand each other. So yeah, Jill, for me, big tick in this movie. Let's talk about Claire. So, Claire, for me, like, Claire's always been the most sassy one. And we think like back to that 1998, like Resident Evil 2, like, you lose, big guy. Like, just, I love Claire for being, I love that, there are clear differences between our female characters here. And I love that Claire's like, she's like that younger, that sassier type character, but as well as just, intrinsically somebody who cares so much about other people. And of course, we see that with her connection with Sherry, right? We see that all the way through Resident Evil 2. But as well, Psy, what you beautifully pointed out is the moment when she goes into like, in the prison, goes into the cell, and immediately with everybody else is pushing that, up the table up against the door and is like trying to help people there. That is intrinsically Claire. She is somebody that will go and help people immediately and can still bloody hold her own. Like in Degeneration, like the first kind of animated feature that we got way back when, like the airport sequence in that I absolutely adore. But again, like that little girl, straight away, Claire straight over running, hugging her before she does that incredible slow motion kick and catches the gun from Leon, which is amazing. But yeah, she is the caretaker. She's very kind of mother. But yeah, what's your thoughts of Claire in this?
Yeah, decent, absolutely decent. Like, it's not going to be my favorite Claire performance ever, but she is my favorite character, so I can be overly precious and critical about it. But you're right, there are lots of little moments where you're like, yep, good, they've identified who she is with the prison segment, with the fact that they specifically kind of point out a bit more about who TerraSave are, as opposed to the other organizations where they go in and sort of just take care of people afterwards. And they point it out with the doctor guy who calls them out for being terrorists, because that's what the media calls them. And then he's like, oh, you're going to help me despite the fact that I just called you a terrorist? I'm like, well, yeah, that's what I do. Stuff like that. I was like, Good.
Yeah.
You know, they got the character right. This, even more example of bad design. Like, she's wearing the same thing in this as she does in everything at this point now, which I just can't. I own one of those red jackets, but that's not the point. Like, she doesn't need to just wear that and that's it. She probably stinks at this point, right? And it's a minor thing, but the hair color for me, they just haven't got it right for a little while. It's I don't know why she's a brunette now, because she was always had that sort of red auburn kind of sheen.
Yeah.
Again, that's what I'm going to say, though, because I'm like the super fan, so I'm going to nitty gritty the little things. But widely, yes, you're right. They absolutely differentiate, I think, everyone really well, to be fair. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And I love that you brought up the point that she said that to Dr. Taylor as well. And he's like, I called you a terrorist. You know, I've given you every reason not to help me. And she's like, well, and straight away, she's like, look, shut up. Of course, I'm going to help you, because that is Claire. But yeah, you're right about the costumes. Like, you know, that is such fan service again, like, because apparently these characters can't exist outside wearing anything else.
Tattoo characters, yeah.
I know, literally, right? But I mean, I do love kind of like from the first game into the third game, if we look at Jill specifically, like, I love that they changed the costume there. You know, like where, I mean, you know,
used
the first
to do it
game
for everyone.
I know,
like,
right?
Everyone at least has a color scheme in Resident Evil. Like, everyone will always wear their favorite color. Yeah. Well, at least they would change it game to game. But in the last sort of like 5+ years, everyone just wears the same thing all the time. It's not great.
No. But I like what you said there about the color scheme. You know, like, even in our minds, we can identify the color schemes of each character straight away. And like in Revelations 2, which I'm so pleased you brought up because it's a banger of a game. And even Claire there, she's wearing slightly different from what she usually wears, which was nice to me. Of course, she's still got a jacket on. I still get that. But you know, like, isn't she wearing like a pair of jeans in that as well?
Yes, I think so. And also, in its defense of Revelations 2, that's where the red leather jacket started. That was the first one. And then Resident Evil Remake 2 came along. And then now we've had Infinite Darkness and Death Island, which have just gone, oh, she likes red leather jackets and skin type black jeans or whatever I get, and that's about it. Yeah, which is fair. Maybe, I don't know, I like that they try to reference this as well when they first came to Alcatraz Island. As we said, like, you know, Jill had this long kind of cardigan on, which she very quickly got rid of, and then obviously Chris with his shirt on as well, which very quickly went as well at one point, which you know, we can laugh at that as like kind of winks as well to the camera from Capcom. This is our characters, they're going to wear the same thing you've seen them wearing for 20 years. All right, let's talk about Chris. So let's jump in. So Chris obviously is one of the OGs, and Chris like holds a very special place in my heart. Chris himself has been on one heck of a journey when we consider all of Resident Evil at this point. Like, he has been through and seen a lot and has been on opposing sides in interesting ways. But in this film in particular, I kind of feel like we're harkening back to the classic Chris, and I kind of like that. Right. You know, like, we haven't got like, you know, boulder punching Chris. We haven't got like Resident Evil 8 Chris here. We've just got like more of like maybe like an evolution from Code Veronica. Like, we're leaning kind of a lot more like as if he's going towards Resident Evil 5. He's certainly wearing similar clothing. But as well, I kind of like that Chris is just like this father figure, and he just gets it, you know, and he just and this relationship that he has with each of them individually, he understands the team, he understands their strengths. And he's kind of like, he can see everything of what's going on and just knows, right, this is what we've got to do. Let's crack on. Let's do it. And Chris to me is just, although he wasn't at the forefront of this movie, and definitely not in the way that, say, Jill was, which for me, Jill, they really kind of pushed into the spotlight of this movie. But Chris is always just, whenever I see Chris and Jill together, man, like, I'm in. Like, I'm in. I love that. They haven't pushed their relationship to get together as a couple. They work together, they understand each other, and they are colleagues. And for me, I just love that relationship. And because I love Jill, I also equally kind of tie Chris in with her. And I just really like him. And I really liked his presentation in this movie. I feel like he's a bit of an anchor in this film, I guess, in that way. Like, as you say, he sort of ties everyone together a little bit. He's the sort of the guy that's trying to get Jill to let go of the guilt that she has and the trauma and stuff like that, when no one else is holding it against her but herself and stuff like that. So you're right about having a softer side. Certainly, he's a character that has absolutely gone through peaks and troughs of complexity, or, you know, in this game he's going to be dark and brooding. In this one, not so much. We seem to be in a little bit of a lower area here where he's a little more chilled out, which is nice before things get a little bit crazy with Village in however many years takes place after this. In that way, he's a nice soft anchor for comedic Leon to play off there. There's kind of like their bro moments and stuff, and he gets to
Yeah.
do that with Jill. And I also appreciate that he doesn't. He's not overbearing of his little sister as well. Like we got to see them have like a sort of a sibling connection with Code Veronica and him be a bit more of a protector. But at this point, they just seem very respectful of what each other's do, and they know each other's strengths and weaknesses, like you say. So they don't get in each other's way, I suppose.
Yeah, and I love that you said that. Like, that's really important, where he understands his dynamic and his relationship with Claire. Of course he does. Like, she no longer is the little girl that needs to be protected by Big Brother. Like, she can hold her own, right? And especially with all the work that she's doing as well. Like, she has her own life. She knows what she's doing, and she's a kick-ass girl. And then he is the one that probably understands Jill better than anyone. So as you said, so rightfully, Psy, is that he's the one that goes up to Jill and says, look, I understand that, you don't have to hang on to this. You don't have to keep doing this. Like, I'm taking you off the case, because he can see what she's going through. And that's not for the sake of anything else, but just in other words, because I care about you, and he is the one that gets Jill the most in this. And he's even the one that says, like, look, we've got Jill, so therefore we've still got hope. He understands just how much of an asset she is to the team. And I love that Chris understands that. Yeah. And as you say, a bit more chill. I love this version of Chris. For me, is, as you said so beautifully there, he's the anchor of all of the characters. Let's do Leon. So, Leon for me, I just, like you and I, we started with Resident Evil 2. Like, Leon was like such an amazing introduction. Like, the journey that Leon's been on, from being like a rookie police officer, like, to then go on to becoming this special agent that works directly for the president, right? Like, this journey that Leon's been on, like this special agent that he is now, I'm kind of just so proud of him. I feel like he's like my baby. Like, I'm just so proud of him. Like how like far he's come, and just how he's able to like handle himself, and like just he's very strategic, and that's what I really like about Leon. But as well, as you said earlier, is that he's just bringing the fun with some of his lines, and like I love that they're exploring this more with Leon, where he's kind of like brushing a lot of things off, like, oh, this again, like. He's not worried. He's not over encumbered by anything. He's not like really worried. He's like, of course, he understands like when situations are tense. Hell, he has that massive fight with Maria. I mean, Jesus Christ, he could die at any moment, but he can still bring his own and be a badass, and yet can bring levity so much. And especially, I think he does that to this movie.
He's the right choice for a character to have the sort of more comic relief moments and stuff like that. Absolutely. For me, it is a little odd, but time is a healer. But Vendetta, which takes place a year before this, he's like an alcoholic, mess. After Chris did that 2 years prior in Resident Evil 6, like those two characters, sometimes it feels like Capcom overlap them a little bit too much. But I do really like Leon in this, and he fits into the team nicely as sort of being, as you say, the guy that's just like, well, here we are again, and just makes a stupid quip about this and that, and he's seen it all before, and he's sort of not hardened to it in a horrible way, but it's just nothing. It's just like it's another day on the job to him. Like, so yeah, I really appreciate his function here, and also as well that, and this goes for most characters, that he didn't overwhelm any particular scene. There could be a tendency for him to, because he's arguably the most popular, or at least the most well-known Resident Evil character at this point, I think.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
he's in some of the biggest titles with 2 and 4 and such. So he good amount of screen time without sort of being overbearing, if you like. And also thankful that you say about Chris and Jill's relationship. I'm really glad we didn't get Leon hitting on Jill. I was like, that would have been a bit weird for me. But
no, again, it's very similar. Like, they just respect each other, because in Resident Evil 2, like, they're both so new to everything what's going on, right? So they've got that shared experience. I mean, Leon's like first day on the job thinks he's just going to be like, part of the RPD, just part of like the police department. He doesn't realize he's going to have to deal with a zombie outbreak in the town, in like Raccoon City. And then, Claire's just there to find her brother, and like is not expecting to be in on this at all. Is a lot more younger and naive. And then they work together so well because of that. And that's part of the magic of Resident Evil 2. It really is. Like, you and I as naive players as well are naive with these two characters finding our way through this game. And it works so well like that. But yeah, I love that they didn't go down that route. They just respect each other, they get each other, and they work bloody well together as well. And as well, just to jump back to Chris briefly, I love that he brought up Piers from Resident Evil 6, and he even said, like, look, when he's talking to Jill and he says, look, like, I lost my partner, I lost Piers, he sacrificed himself so I could survive. And I love, like, as we said earlier, these little moments of like when they bring back stuff that's happened in like previous animated series, but also in the games, you know, and it's kind of like solidifying that this is canon, like, you know, these things where have happened and they refer back to that. And I really love that they do that throughout.
Connective tissue, isn't it, really? You're
That's
like,
it.
yeah, see, we're all weaved together. My only, as a bit of a lore nerd, my only issue with that is like, it seems really odd that Chris would bring that up. And it's implied that it's the first time because he's like, I had a partner, his name was Pierce, as if he's never talked to Jill about it. But that was like 3 years ago, dude. You're only bringing it up now. It's like, okay, fair enough. Maybe it cut you deep and you're not ready to talk about it. But it seemed a little odd. But that aside, it was you're right. It was really nice because those were the moments where you do the Leonardo DiCaprio meme that where you point at the TV and go, "Oh, I know what he's talking about." Like, with Claire, they mentioned the Harvardville incident and that is Resident Evil Degeneration, which, as you say, is kind of an obscure CGI animation at this point. But you're like, "Oh, I know that one too." Yeah, stuff like that is cool.
No, it is. Like, as a fan, like you do a backflip in your chair, like when you recognize that stuff, you're like, "Oh, that's for me. I get that. I know what you're doing." Yeah, 100%. Exactly. All right, let's round off with Rebecca Chambers. Now, as you pointed out earlier, like Rebecca's one of your favorites, and I absolutely adore Rebecca. Like, we think about her arc over the series, like, so she's the only surviving member of Bravo team after the first game. And I mean, when we get the Rebecca in the very first game, and like, you know, like this, like almost like meek, like smaller kind of girl, and they play up to that in the first game, but still is the survivor, you know, is the one that comes through and gets shit done, you know. And I love that about her. Like, honestly, she is the character where when, you know, everything's down, like the shit has hit the fan, what the heck do we do? Rebecca's the one who comes through. And I love that so much, especially when you're playing as Chris in the first game. The shit hits the fan, Rebecca's the one that comes through, you know, like all of the little moments. And then we get the arc that Rebecca's gone on as well. Is incredible how, you know, I mean, she's basically a badass. Like, you know, they've really focused her strength and her intelligence, like what she understands is like this scientific, you know, person, basically. She's the one that's like, right, let's get this antivirus. Let's get this sorted out. I love that she arrives on the island with the SWAT team. And again, you know, they all get wiped out, but she has the smarts of, right, I'm, you know, basically survives this, gets on there, gets on. She has the case, obviously, with the antiviruses on, you know, knows that she needs it, delivers it to everyone. But then that small moment that we mentioned at the end there when she's with Claire, and like Claire's like, right, okay, we've got the backdoor access to these bio drones. Let's get rid of them. And like Rebecca's the one that says, oh, wait, no. I've got an idea. And it pays off, absolutely pays off. And I mean, I love Rebecca for that. She is the one where, as I say, when everything's down on the floor, we have no idea what to do. Oh my God, everyone's freaking out. Rebecca will be the one who says, actually, let's do this. Let's go. And I love her for that.
Yep. Yeah, there's a lot of good moments for her throughout the series like that, across all various different bits and pieces. And as I said before, I'm really glad that it's so easy to make her sort of the kidnap victim. And I'm really glad they didn't do it again here because they did it in Vendetta. And there is also a canonical stage play called Biohazard the Stage, which I think takes place in the same year as Vendetta. Same thing happens there as well, where she gets kidnapped. And it's like, it seems to keep happening. But here, yeah, she really gets to have that moment at the end, which is really cool. So it doesn't tarnish it like some of the previous appearances that she's had for me. I'm really glad that we've got at least one character who isn't much all guns blazing, like she plays the support role. And they give her those moments that make her completely different, but just as valuable in her own way. So, yeah Rebecca, super underrated character that they need to do more with in general.
Absolutely agree. Because, I mean, how great was Resident Evil 0, like with Rebecca?
Great game.
Like, who knows what happened to Billy? You know, gone forever. But you know, but great, fantastic game. Like, loved it. Rebecca in that, brilliant. Like, absolutely brilliant. Such a nice, like, kind of backstory to her before we get into obviously the original Resident Evil as well. Love all of that. So cool. But yeah,
we recently on First Aid Spray did we talked about the book based on Resident Evil 0.
Yes,
which is, as it turns out, incredible in terms of Rebecca's characterization in that. If you're a fan of Rebecca Chambers, do seek out 0 Hour by S.D. Perry because she really gets her character just spot on. I was thoroughly impressed.
Nice.
So there's your recommended reading.
Hey, everyone, go and check it out. Honestly, I've over the years, I've dipped in and out of the Resident Evil novels for no particular reason. Just I've kind of sometimes read them out of order and everything like that. And I've always seen them and I've owned a couple of them. But yeah, I'm gonna have to check it out actually because I do love Zero. And yeah, if the novelization, for me, if it hits the same way that the game hits, and as you said, get Rebecca right, then I am fully in.
It's a pretty straightforward adaptation of the game's events. There is a kind of interesting new quirks added on like some of the other books. But yeah, in terms of the writing, it's pretty good. It's pretty up there.
Nice. All right, cool. I'll have to check it out. All right, Sai, to round off on the movie, I've got two more things to talk about. Well, one, first of all, tell me your favorite scene from the movie.
Oh, you've put me on the spot now. I mean, it's going to go easy, but it is that final boss for everything that we talked about. Everyone in their own sort of element, all the different team ups. Leon doing his quips while he's driving the Jeep around, crashing multiple vehicles. Rebecca and Claire getting a team up for the first time in history was something I didn't know I needed, but it's really nice. And then, the catharsis of finally, after all these years of waiting for Jill to come back, aren't they going to address what's happened? They did manage to do that in a big boss fight of all things as well. So surprisingly, considering some of the other CGI animations end on a little bit of a whimper for me, this really does end super. The only thing that really could have made it any better is the pilot of the helicopter should have been Barry, surely.
Absolutely.
But the end of the film is the best bit for all the right reasons.
Yeah, and I'm very much in agreement. There are such strong scenes in this. I say, the Claire and Rebecca team up, the moment when Rebecca decides to turn the bio drones on, that for me was great. Great character moment, great story moment. Jill just being Jill, it's essentially just incredible. But especially in the scene when she drops down into the sewer and it's just her, and honestly is so badass. The way she takes out all of those zombies is just epic. The physicality that they get with Jill in this, they get it so right. But it all comes down to the reason the film exists is for that final moment. Them all taking on the big boss together. That is the reason this film exists. And even just them all pointing the guns at the same time, obviously that slow motion tentacle scene. And as you said, Sai, all of the characters doing their thing, together as duos to take on this beast. For me, that's just, it's music to my ears. As a Resident Evil fan, it genuinely is. But So that was our coverage of Resident Evil Death Island. But before we go, Sai, I need to ask you, what would you like to see next from the Resident Evil video game franchise? So you can talk about what would you like to see in Resident Evil 9, or what other game would you like to see remade, or what would you like next?
That is a toughie.
I know.
For me, I want more new stories. So I'm not going to say a remake, as much as they've all been pretty good. And there are some games that I would like to see them do some reinvigorating with. I would say a new story, whether that's Resident Evil 9 or some kind of a Revelations 3 or some kind of spin-off, which we haven't had a spin-off in the series since Revelations 2, really.
Yeah.
So I don't know. With 9, they really do need to carry on some of the way that 8 ended, with the questions about the BSAA and all this sort of mystery that they put in there. And I'm very interested to see that. But I'm in the camp where I would like to see more things kind of like Death Island that fill in gaps. Let's go back to 2015. Let's go back to this year, because the characters are getting older now. Chris is, I mean, he's probably 50 something now, or just about around there. And Jill's not far behind. Which is why she still looks really young in this film, because they just refuse to age her. She's got a virus, therefore she's young forever. Okay. So they're clearly hesitant to do that kind of thing. So make a Revelations 3, fill in some gaps for me, please. There's a bunch of years that stuff don't happen. We can keep using these beloved characters and put them in new stories and that kind of thing. I mean, ideally, I would love a Rebecca game.
Yeah.
And she seems like the character they could really bring the horror back with. Fixed camera angles and all. Let's do the whole thing. Because she's a more vulnerable character where you could bring back all of that stuff. But that's real pie in the sky stuff.
No, I love that. And I agree. Revelations to me is more of the overlooked series. I love both games. I still have in my bloody ears. Sometimes I'll just hear out of nowhere. Some days I'll hear Mayday, Mayday. that boss, and I just hear that playing in my head on repeat. And I'm like, oh my god. But yeah, Revelations was genuinely fantastic. Like both, really enjoyed them for different reasons as well. Especially like Revelations 2, I thought was really sweet. But yeah, I agree. Another entry into Revelations would be really, really sweet. If they are going to remake something, I would love to see them do something with Outbreak. I was actually a big adopter of Outbreak. Really enjoyed it.
Speaking my language now.
yeah. Outbreak File 2. Like honestly, I was a big fan. And again, probably for similar reasons as what we were talking about. It's like I love this idea of like a core just group of survivors that are coming together. They all have their own little skills. And are just like working together to get through this outbreak. And I really love that they went down there. And I kind of wish they did more with that. So hopefully if there's little rumblings in the community, something will happen. I don't know. But yeah, but I'd love to see them do something else with that because I really loved Outbreak. But yeah, but for, going forward, like I agree, Psy, like, we need to move into some type of new territory now where, it's great that they're doing remakes of classic games, but that needs to exist over here. And we need to push forward with something new here. Yes, like it's the main kind of canon now. What are these characters doing now? It's great that we've had this animated film and we've kind of had to push forward with the characters. But in the games, like, where are we now? Who are we focusing on? What's going on? What's driving the plot forward? Who is our main antagonist now? What is going on? And like, it's nice that they've rounded off the kind of Ethan story and everything like that. But as you said, there's still questions hanging in the air now. And who better to like further explore these questions than our core characters? So yeah, what is going on? But who knows? So yeah. So that has been our coverage of Resident Evil Death Island, and Psy and I just, fangirling all about our favorite moments from Resident Evil. Yeah. But what do you think of Resident Evil Death Island? Have you watched it yet? And please do let us know your thoughts. Please do get in touch with us at all of the relevant pages, which you know by now. But Psy, my lovely, where can everybody find you on the internet? Tell us all your socials.
You can find me, generally speaking, at most places at Psyniac_123, whether that's Instagram, TikTok, and also that other one, which seems to have a name now that I refuse to say. The one with it used to be about birds and now is about ego. I'm on that one too.
There you go, everyone. So make sure you go and follow Psy as well for all of the Resident Evil goodness. If you do want to follow the podcast as well, this is Last Week on Pod. So if you type that in on the same lack of bird place, as well as Instagram and Threads, we are all there. Type that in, you'll find the podcast. We're available on all streaming platforms, and this is available to watch on YouTube if you want to check it out on there as well. If you want to follow me, I am at Straughan87 on Instagram, on the new place, on Threads, everywhere. Just type that in, you'll see my face. So, Psy, I just want to say a big thank you again for coming on to do this. I love that we had this chat because, we've identified that we're both big Resident Evil fans from like kind of the time that we met, and it's been a lot of fun. Thanks so much.
You're very welcome. I had a thoroughly enjoyable time.
Excellent. All right. Until next time, everyone, take care.